Hey everybody, this is Jinjo's MTG coming at you with my very first video. Today we're going to be opening up a pack of Ixalan, doing a pack 1 pick from it, and then simulating the next 2 picks as if we were actually in a draft. We're going to pull out the top 4 picks in each pack, and also the bottom 3, and talk about why we wouldn't pick some, and narrow it down to our final pick. Let's dive down into the world of Ixalan, shall we? This is a pretty healthy pack, I would say. We got some pretty awesome uncommons to choose from, even a couple commons that are catching my eye. Right now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of cut out the fluff, get rid of the cards that are just kind of filler and we're not worried about, and pull out the top 4 best ones and the bottom 3 and see where we're at. First card up is Crushing Canopy. This card has great flexibility, being able to destroy a creature with flying or an enchantment. Enchantments in this set are pretty efficient, mainly auras that buff up their creatures, and people are looking to throw those enchantments on their flyers. So there is a chance you're going to get a 2-for-1 when you cast this card. This is definitely a strong sideboard card, but not a first pick. You'll more than likely be able to pick this up later in the draft for sure, if you're in green, that is. Speaking of strong enchantments, we got Mark of the Vampire next. This is a really great aura that's going to give one of your creatures lifelink and +2/+2. And that's really going to help you out when you're in a really tight race with somebody. Well, I would love to grab one of these. In the first pack, it's probably not worth it. We don't really know what kind of deck we're going to be in at the moment, and I'd rather grab a nice strong creature first and then attach this to it. So I think we can keep our eyes out for it later on, maybe in pack 2 or something like that. But as for now, I think we're going to pass. Another note to keep in mind is that, ironically, this card actually fails in the vampire deck, as most of your vampires already have lifelink. So this really isn't going to be too efficient in that deck. I'd throw this in a pirate deck, or yeah, probably a pirate deck. That'd probably be the best one for it. Next up, we have Arcane Adaptation. This card is definitely not a card you want in your limited deck. Unfortunately, Ixalan doesn't really have a ton of payoffs in terms of tribes. I mean, you get a couple things like dinosaurs have haste, or they get +1/+1, or pirates get +1/+1, but just there's nothing really too big that really warrants you having this card, and taking your 3rd turn off to play this really isn't going to be effective. You're basically putting this on the board and then doing nothing. So I would avoid this card at all costs. It might have some implications in Modern, maybe. I don't play Modern a ton, but playing this and maybe making all your creatures slivers or something like that might have a big effect, but let's just pass on this. Don't ever pick this card. So let's move on. Alright, let's get into the good stuff. First off here, we have Emissary of Sunrise. This is a really dang good card, especially if when you hit that Explorer trigger and you get that +1/+1 counter, you're going to end up with a 3/2 with First Strike, and First Strike is an incredible ability. It's going to hold off a lot of attackers, and when you decide to get aggressive with this, it's going to make your opponent think twice before he blocks it. It's definitely a good card, definitely first pickable. Next up, we got Ranging Raptors. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on this thing, but whenever I look at it, I just can't really see how it's bad. I mean, it's a 2/3 for 3, which is decent stats, and its enrage ability lets you get a basic land out. It's going to help you ramp up to your higher end cards, and I just think it's pretty good. I mean, with that 3 toughness, I bet you can get at least 2 triggers off this thing before it dies, or it's going to trade for something, and then you're going to get a land. So you're going to be a card up in this situation if you trade. So let me know in the comments what you think. I've heard mixed reviews on it. I've never really had a problem with it, so let me know what you think. Next up, we have Imperial Aerosaur. This is a kick-butt card. I mean, a 3/3 flyer for 4, if I stopped right there, I'd be pretty dang happy with that card. But then it has the added text of giving another one of your creatures +1/+1 and flying until end of turn. I mean, you're going to cast this thing, you're going to shoot in and get a good chunk of damage out of your opponent, and then you have this 3/3 flyer just hanging out on your board. You're going to be able to attack with it pretty often. You're going to be able to very effectively block other flyers that your opponent has. I mean, this is just an incredible card. My eyes are definitely on this one for right now. And then our 4th pick is Run Aground. I really enjoy this card. I mean, it's got instant speed. It's going to put that creature on top of your opponent's library. And I've even heard people say that it's kind of like a pseudo time walk in a sense. I mean, you cast this, you put that card back on top of their library, they're just going to redraw it, recast it, and probably end their turn, depending on what you put on top of their library. So this is a really good removal spell. probably one of my favorites in blue. Might not be the best, but it's definitely one of my favorites. So let's narrow it down to our final 2 picks. I'm going to say probably Emissary of Sunrise and Imperial Aerosaur are going to be our 2 picks out of this pack. So let's do that here. So it's almost guaranteed that we're not going to see the other card. One of these is definitely not going to wheel for sure. So between these 2 cards, I mean, you got a really relevant 3-drop that is going to stop your opponent in its tracks. And then on the other hand, you got this flyer, this 3/3 flyer that's going to protect you in the air. It's going to be able to attack in the air, and it's going to buff another one of your creatures. Another note, it is a dinosaur, and that does have some implications depending on the rest of your deck. So all in all, when you compare these 2, this is our first pack, and we want to get something really strong for our first pick. So I think we're going to take the Imperial Aerosaur for sure here. Alright, we're going to shift gears a little bit here. We got our first pick out of our first pack. Now we're going to shift to a drafting situation where we pick the Imperial Aerosaur, and now we're going to receive a pack where 1 card will be missing, and then we'll repeat that process one more time to get our first 3 picks. So let's move on to pack 2. Alright, we got a pretty decent pack here. There's a good chunk of red cards in here, which pairs very well with white in this set. It usually ends up being a very aggressive deck. And there's also some pretty good white cards here. So I think this pack is going to be really good for us. Let's narrow it down. Let's cut out some of the fluff and talk about some of the cards we're not going to pick and why. First up here, we got Favorable Winds. I'm a pretty big fan of this card. I mean, buffing all your evasive creatures is basically what you want to do to win the game. Unfortunately, though, blue and white just doesn't really exist in this set. It just doesn't have the support. It doesn't really have enough strong flyers, even though our first card here is a flyer. But it's just not really worth taking at this point. So let's move on. Alright, let's talk about Ancient Brontodon. I mean, this guy just looks like your best bud, right? I mean, he looks really nice, but he's a 9/9 vanilla creature, which from my memory is probably the biggest vanilla creature that they've ever put out. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but just from my memory. It's a 9/9, and it costs 8. Now, while that does seem like a pretty good deal, 8 mana is a ton of mana. I mean, you're rarely going to get that in limited games, especially in the set, as it is a very aggressive set. And the other thing is, when you pay 8 mana to play something, you want to play it and basically win the game with that. You could put out the Ancient Brontodon, but then it just sits there. I mean, this thing could be chump blocked really easily. It doesn't have trample, and you know, it's going to be a good blocker. It's going to be a good attacker. It basically can kill anything in the set, but we just expect a lot out of our 8 drops, and this card definitely isn't it. So let's move on from this guy. Sorry, buddy. Next up, we have Nest Robber. This is the 2-drop you play when you don't have any other good 2-drop. This is the definition of a filler card. I mean, the best situation is you're going to play this on turn 2, attack with it on an empty board, get your 2 damage in, and then it's basically dead after that. You could trade for a smaller card, but there's a good chunk of cards in this set that have 3 toughness and basically nulls out your Nest Robbers. So it's just fluff. Definitely don't pick it here. So yeah, let's move on to the good stuff. Alright, first up we have Vance's Blasting Cannon. I really like this card. It's one of the flip cards, so you flip it over and it turns into a land that provides you with red mana, and then you could basically lightning bolt a creature or a player every turn, which is amazing. Like I said, big fan of it. I think it's definitely a first pickable card, and I think it's on the top list for us to pick. I got my eyes on it for sure. Next up, we got Depths of the Desire. This is a really good bounce spell. While the other 2 mana bounce spell is strictly better than this one does give you a nice little treasure token that you can use to splash something in or to ramp you up just a little bit. It's a good little bounce spell. Next up, we have Sunrise Seeker. It's a white card, which is really nice. But a 3/3 for 5 isn't that amazing. A 3/3 with Vigilance for 5, still not too excited. But it does have Explore. And if you get a 4/4 Vigilance for 5, I think you're going to be happy. In general, I've learned that the Explore mechanic, 98% of the time, you're going to want to hit that Explore trigger and get the +1/+1 counter and not the land. They're definitely getting the land is good, especially on the smaller Explorer creatures, but big ones like this, you're going to pretty much kick yourself if you draw that land. So it is a white card. It's a good card, so I got my eye on it. Next up, we have Ixalan's Binding. This is the best white removal spell. Probably one of the best cards in the set, to be honest. I mean, you pay 4, you nullify a creature, and paying 4 for that is kind of, I'd say it's a little expensive. I'd say usually 3 is what we're kind of used to paying and to get that effect. But the little extra text on it that says your opponents can't cast spells with the same name as the exiled card, I think that's pretty dang good. There's 2 things you can do with this. Obviously, you use this on bombs to get rid of them so you don't have to worry about them. But you could even cast this on just a common creature that they may have like 4 copies of. Like if I'm facing off a bunch of Headstrong Brutes, I'm going to put this on the Headstrong Brute and then nullify the other 2 that are in their deck. So when they draw it, it's basically a blank card, or if it's in their hand, it's just sitting there waiting for the creature to be, or for this enchantment to be destroyed, to just be destroyed. Out of these 4, let's narrow it down. I think it's pretty obvious. It's either going to be Vance's Blasting Cannons or Ixalan's Binding. So let's narrow it down here. This is a pretty tough choice for me, to be honest. Vance's Blasting Cannon is really awesome. The one problem I do have with it is you kind of have to build your deck sort of around it, have a nice low curve to be able to play 3 spells in a row. But when you do, I mean, the reward is just incredible. And red-white is definitely a really strong archetype, and usually it's very aggressive. So I think this card would be great in a red-white deck if we kind of build around it. So if we get this, we kind of have a nice little blueprint we can use to kind of fluff up Vance's Blasting Cannon and get it working. But on the other hand, we have one of the best removal spells. I mean, you pay 4, you get rid of the biggest threat on the board, and you stop other threats from coming onto the field if it's a common card. I always think it's best to play a card that doesn't need setup over a card that does need setup. So I think for now we're going to take the Ixalan's Binding, but I wouldn't fault people for taking Vance's Blasting Cannon. I mean, once you flip that thing and you're lightning bolting all this stuff, I mean, it's just value after that. So, but just to play it safe and to also stay open, remember, we're taking our second white card. That means that we're sending out that signal that we're in white and other people are going to avoid white because of this. So yeah, I think we're going to take Ixalan's Binding. But let me know in the comments what you think about this pick, guys. Our next pick was such a windmill slam that I don't really feel the need to discuss the other cards. It's a Pious Interdiction. This is another great removal spell. Gains you 2 life, stops your opponent's creature from attacking or blocking. The only negative side to it is it doesn't stop the creature from activating its abilities, which is kind of what we're used to in these type of cards. But still, it's a removal spell. You're going to play this on a big creature or a flyer that's giving you trouble, and you're going to be pretty dang happy with it. Overall, I think our first 3 picks were pretty dang good. I mean, we got 3 white cards, which is nice. Keeps us very nice and open. It's sending that signal down the table saying, hey, I'm in white. I'm taking all the good cards, which is going to be good for your pack 2. The only big negative I see is that all 3 of the cards are 4-drops, which means most of our 4-drop slot is filled up. I would say taking 2 more, maybe. Probably 2 more 4-drops if we needed to, and then we'd be okay. But we've already taken 3 up, which is a little nervous, but that's okay. They're 3 pretty dang strong cards. I think we did pretty dang good in picking these up. Thank you guys for watching. Had a really good time talking about these cards with you. If you guys want to see more, hit that subscribe button and post down in the comments. Let me know what you think about the picks. Let me know if there's something you would have changed, if there was a card you'd rather pick over what I chose. Yeah, just let me know, guys. I really want to talk with you guys and, you know, learn from you, and you guys can learn from me and just have a really good time. Thanks for joining me. Have a good night, guys. Bye.